It was just after midnight in Indiana, the kind of still, heavy night where the world feels like it's holding its breath. Inside Indiana State Prison, the execution chamber glowed under harsh fluorescent lights, each one buzzing faintly in the silence. Strapped tightly to a padded gurney, Benjamin "Donnie" Richie lay staring at the ceiling. His wrists were bound, an IV line fed into his arm, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. He was 45 years old, but for more than half his life, he had been trapped inside a 6-by-9-foot cell on death row, waiting for this moment. For 25 years, the state of Indiana had been preparing to carry out this sentence. The path that brought Richie here began in the year 2000, with a single night of bad decisions that spiraled into tragedy. His crime was not just another violent act, it was the murder of a police officer, a young man who had been chasing him on foot through a quiet neighborhood in Beech Grove. What began as the theft of a white van on an ordinary September evening would tear apart two families, spark one of the most intense manhunts in Indiana's history, and set in motion a legal battle that would last a quarter of a century. On the night of September 29, 2000, Beech Grove was quiet. Streetlights flickered over tree-lined roads, and the small-town calm felt almost unshakable. But in the shadows, trouble was brewing. 20-year-old Benjamin Richie was with two friends, Michael Greer and Michael Moody. They were restless, reckless, and hungry for trouble. That evening, they spotted a white van parked outside a local gas station. The keys were inside. No one was watching. It was too easy. They climbed in, started the engine, and drove off. Within minutes, the van's owner reported the theft, and the details spread across police radios. White van, specific plate number, last seen leaving the station. For the next 2 hours, the stolen vehicle moved through the city undetected, weaving between neighborhoods as the three men plotted their next move. That changed when Officer Matthew Hickey, on his way to a traffic accident, noticed a van that matched the exact description from the alert. He confirmed it with dispatch. Yes, this was the stolen van, and began to follow. He didn't turn on his lights right away. Instead, he tailed them, calling for backup. Officers Robert Mercury and William Bill Toney soon joined him. The suspects realized they were being watched. The van jerked forward, speeding down Beech Grove's streets, cutting corners sharply, swerving in a desperate attempt to lose the trailing police cars. The chase lasted only minutes before the van swerved off the road and slammed into the front yard of a quiet home. Before the police could even step out of their cruisers, the doors flew open and two figures bolted. Michael Greer ran in one direction. Officer Hickey sprinted after him and brought him down within seconds. But Benjamin Richie chose the other route, disappearing between houses and over wooden fences, his heart pounding in his chest. Behind him, Officer William Toney gave chase, his police radio crackling in the night air. The chase tore through backyards, over fences, and into narrow spaces between houses. Then, without warning, Richie stopped, crouched, and pulled a gun from his waistband. Officer Toney had no idea he was armed. 4 shots rang out. One bullet struck Toney in the upper chest, just above his bulletproof vest. It was a perfect but deadly hit, fatal almost instantly. Toney collapsed to the ground, the air filled with the deafening quiet that follows violence. William Bill Toney was only 31 years old, a day away from his birthday, and just 2 years into his career as a police officer. He left behind a wife, and a devastated family. News of the shooting spread instantly. Radio channels lit up with urgent calls, officer down, armed suspect on the run. Beech Grove transformed overnight. Police units from across the state poured into the area. Marion County deputies, Indiana State Police, federal agents. SWAT teams combed the streets, helicopters swept the skies with searchlights, and roadblocks choked the exits from the city. Residents were ordered to lock their doors, stay inside, and call police if they saw anything suspicious. For nearly 24 hours, Richie managed to evade capture. He hid in alleys, backyards, and vacant houses, staying just ahead of the search teams. But the manhunt broke wide open when an anonymous tip came in. The caller directed police to the home of Michael Moody, the third man in the original theft. Officers surrounded the house, and inside, they found exactly who they were looking for. Richie didn't resist. He was taken into custody without a fight. His arrest was only the beginning. When investigators looked into his background, they found a story that didn't excuse his crime but shed light on how he had ended up here. Benjamin Richie had been born into chaos on May 3, 1980. His biological father was absent, and his mother, Marion Martin, struggled with drug addiction and worked as a stripper. She abandoned him twice before he turned 3, leaving him with whoever would take him in temporarily. When Marion married a man named Donald Peoples, Benjamin thought he might finally have the stability he craved. But when Donald learned Benjamin wasn't his biological son, he kept his own children and sent Benjamin away. Eventually, Vera and Oscar Richie adopted him, but by then, the damage was deep. He struggled in school, repeating first grade and receiving counseling from a local minister in 3rd and 4th grade. At age 10, he was hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation, diagnosed with bipolar disorder and cognitive impairments. Doctors believed these stemmed from years of abuse and his mother's drug use during pregnancy. He dropped out of school in 9th grade. By 18, he was in serious trouble, convicted of burglary and spending time behind bars. By 20, he was out on probation, drifting through life with no direction, untreated mental health problems, and no steady job. The stage for tragedy was already set. After Officer Tony's death, the Marion County prosecutor announced they would seek the death penalty. Michael Greer struck a deal, pleading guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testifying against Richie. Michael Moody faced auto theft and gun charges. Richie's trial began in August 2002. Jury selection wrapped at the end of July, and from the first day, the prosecution's case was airtight. Ballistics matched the gun to the fatal bullet. Eyewitnesses placed Richie at the scene, and Greer's testimony sealed it. The defense tried to humanize Richie, pointing to his abusive childhood, mental health diagnoses, and abandonment. But the prosecution reminded the jury that many people endure hardship without killing a police officer. On August 10, 2002, the jury found him guilty on all counts. 4 days later, they deliberated on his fate for just 3 hours before unanimously recommending death. Richie laughed when he heard the verdict. On October 15, 2002, the judge formally sentenced him to die. Officer Tony's widow stood in court and called Richie a coward. That day, he joined the small group of inmates housed on Indiana's death row at the state prison. For the next 25 years, Richie's life was a cycle of isolation, legal filings, and slow-moving appeals. He appeared in a British documentary about Indiana State Prison, showing the strange mix of monotony and mental strain that came with waiting to die. His legal team fought hard, appealing in state and federal courts, but each attempt failed. 2004, 2007, 2017. In 2024, the Attorney General moved to set an execution date. The Indiana Supreme Court scheduled it for May 20th, 2025. 2 clemency hearings followed. At the first, Richie expressed genuine remorse, saying he had destroyed many lives. At the second, Officer Tony's family stood firm, urging the board to let the execution proceed. On May 14th, 2025, the parole board unanimously denied clemency, and the governor upheld the decision. His attorneys filed desperate, last-minute appeals, but both the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court refused to intervene. On his final day, Richie requested the tour of Italy from Olive Garden, fettuccine alfredo, lasagna, and chicken parmesan. He spent his last hours meeting with his lawyers and approved visitors. Just after midnight, guards escorted him into the execution chamber. Witnesses watched from behind glass as he gave his final words. I love my family, my friends, and all the support I've gotten. I hope they all find peace." The lethal injection began, and at 12:46 a.m., Benjamin Donnie Richie was pronounced dead. Officer William Bill Toney is remembered as a dedicated public servant who gave his life protecting his community. His death left a permanent scar on Beech Grove, and his family has carried that loss for decades. 2 lives ended because of one night: a police officer who died in the line of duty, and a troubled young man whose choices led him to the execution chamber 25 years later. The ripple effects still echo, a reminder of how quickly one reckless decision can destroy everything.